This is Christina Freeland. In my opinion, she's one of the 10 smartest people Western civilization has ever produced. She is currently the Foreign Minister of Canada. 3 years ago, I beat her in a debate. She's Foreign Minister. Let's call that a wash. She knew 5 minutes into her first meeting with the American leader that she was the wrong person for the job. Trump has this weird personality quirk where he feels he has to be the smartest person in the room, and with her in the same zip code, that was never going to happen. So she knew that she needed someone to put in front with a tight outfit and great hair and a nice smile who just nod and smile and never open their damn mouth, and she found the perfect person. Justin Trudeau is by far Donald Trump's favorite leader, because he just stands to the side and does a lot of this. The Canadians call it the hug offensive, and it was working gloriously until Canada had the honor of hosting the G7 summit last summer. And for the first time, as host, Trudeau had to speak, and the internal monologue that Trump had been using to fill in the gaps that was all very complimentary did not match what he was hearing. And relations literally fell apart in an hour. When Lighthizer came back from Mexico and called up to Canada and said, we've got a bilateral deal with the Mexicans, you have 7 days to accept our terms, the Canadians caved in 6. Why did they hold out for so long and then cave so quickly? Well, it has to do with this map. This is how Canada has always seen itself in the world, or at least since 1945. Canada is on the flight path for the intercontinental ballistic missiles that would fly from the Soviet Union to the United States. So there is never, ever a version of American security in the Cold War that did not reflexively also protect Canada. The Canadians could have been security free riders. To their credit, they were not. They were always the first ones there to help, but that doesn't mean they didn't use their leverage somewhere else. So whenever there was a security crisis, the Canadian PM would call up the American president, commit forces, and say, oh, by the way, we could really enjoy some extra access to your market for Quebecois cheese. And all of these incidental concessions were rounded up and put into the original NAFTA accord. They were all removed from NAFTA too. And because the Trump administration sees Canada as more of a competitor and Mexico as more of a partner, they had no choice about that. Their environment has changed, and now their trade relationship has as well. Shinzo Abe thought he had a deal. He was the second world leader to visit Trump post-inauguration, and they hit it off splendidly. They had a series of agreements on security cooperation, intelligence sharing. Abe went home thinking everything was great, and then 6 months later, Donald Trump leveled steel and aluminum tariffs. Abe comes back to Washington, wondering what's going on. He says, I thought we had a deal. You were going to be in front with the carriers. The Japanese and all the Asian allies were going to be behind you. We're going to face down the Chinese together. You were going to pay for it all. And Trump's like, oh, no, I see why you got confused. Guns for butter. That was the old global order structure. Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. We will use every tool we have to force whatever end result we want on a tactical issue. And don't go calling up the Australians and the Koreans and try to build some sort of multilateral framework to hem us in. We don't do that anymore. So Abe went home, reread The Art of the Deal, was convinced that this was all a negotiating ploy, and he called up the Koreans and the Australians and tried to build a multilateral net. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump announces the deal with Korea, and with Mexico, and with Canada, and Abe realizes that 3 of Japan's 4 largest trading partners had already rearranged themselves into a post-order network, and the last country was China. He caved. Those talks will probably finish up later this summer. We all complain about our jobs way too much. Let me start with the punchline. There is no version of Brexit that will lead anywhere other than a hard divorce. European policymaking gives every individual country a full veto on the important stuff. Brexit is an important thing. There's no version of the deal that will satisfy Ireland and Spain and Germany and the Netherlands and France. This was always going to be a hard crash out. Now, if you're like me and you think that the EU is ultimately unsustainable, there's an argument to be made that leaving and starting on what's next, getting a head start, makes a lot of sense. But that's not what the United Kingdom is doing. The United Kingdom is trapped in this never-ending Brextension process where it still has all the costs and restrictions of the EU, but the benefits are leaking away, especially the ability to negotiate from a position of strength with anyone in the outside world, anyone beyond Europe, about what's next. Now, Britain has been here before. Quick war story. In World War II, not World War II, World War I, the Americans, as we tend to be, were late to the game. And when we finally got involved, we didn't have a Navy. Kind of a problem. So we floated these guys, the Town class. By far the crappiest vessels that have ever served in the US Navy. Some of them actually were taking on water while they were still in dry dock, which should not be possible. When they would sail by a British vessel in the North Atlantic, the British sailors would get up on deck and take bets as to whether or not the American vessel would have to call for assistance because it broke down. Luckily, they did not see a lot of combat. And at the war's end, we brought them all back to the States, put tarps over them, forgot that they ever existed because it was just humiliating. World War II rolls around. We're late to that party too. And Churchill calls up FDR and says, hey, if you're not going to get in this fight, at least give us some equipment. FDR is like, well, we have the Town class. After having a minor stroke, Churchill says, thank you. And on his way out the door, FDR is like, oh, no. Those aren't free. As payment, we will take every single military facility you have in the Western Hemisphere. And 3 centuries of imperial expansion unwound in a day. What the Trump administration is going to do to Britain will be at least that harsh. And at a minimum, it will cost the United Kingdom the financial district in London. Americans love to stress about China. I don't. Those islands off the coast, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, the Chinese call it the first island chain. They have always barred Chinese commercial involvement with the rest of the planet. Commercial transport requires open, free seas where anyone can sail at any time on any schedule with any change whenever they want for any reason. That has never been possible in Chinese history with the exception of under the global order when everyone was on the same side. There is no version of a world without America in which China continues to exist as a mercantile power. Its navy may have a lot of ships, but only 30 of them have the capacity to sail more than 1,000 kilometers from shore. It is not a regional naval power, much less a global naval power. And President Xi knows it. And they can't become consumption-led. Remember the one-child policy? Well, shocker, 30 years after the one-child policy, they are running out of 25-year-olds. The Chinese are not nearly as good at math as they would have the rest of the world believe. And so when President Xi finally had his first summit with Donald Trump, he called ahead and said that he did not want to meet in the White House. He had some things he needed to say in private. So they went to Mar-a-Lago where Trump could control the environment. And Xi's like, you control everything that matters in this relationship. Trade access, maritime access, the energy markets, the financial markets. There is no version of my country being successful or safe or secure or united that does not involve some degree of American largesse. So let's talk about North Korea and cybercrime and the South China Sea, even Taiwan. Let's talk about it all. And the US and China made more progress in bilateral relations in the next 11 months than we had in the previous 20 years. It wasn't enough, and now it's falling apart.